Hello there, El Presidente Tel back once again, and now I'm going to do a response video to Marmiteman4, who seems to have been getting a lot of flack recently from lots of people for his various little views. Hello there, Marmiteman4. Hope you're well, because I'm going to launch straight into this. I've looked at your video that was a couple of months old on a review of Adolf Hitler's Mein Kampf. Now, you know, I am not gonna necessarily take on the whole content of Mein Kampf because, as a disclaimer, here is my copy of Mein Kampf. It's the Mannheim translation. I bought it to try and see what motivates a man to do exactly what he did, and I've been reading it for quite a while now, but I'm about that far in. And that's only because I find his literary style is awful. It's like trying to read through treacle. This man doubles up on himself, he talks in circles, and it's generally very clumsy. Now, you'll probably say it's about translation, but this is one of the better translations that's available in the shops today. But let's go straight into this. Now, you often say that you're not a Nazi and you're not a supporter of Hitler. Well, in fact, you managed to undermine yourself within this video, because from 1 minute you go, I'm not pro-Hitler, and then within 10 seconds you go, well, I'm not totally pro-Hitler. Well, which one is it? You know, I mean, you really need to stamp your colours to the mast on this one. Let us know. You say there are parts of Hitler I don't agree with. What didn't you agree with? You know, let me know what you didn't agree with about Adolf Hitler's policies. I'd be fascinated to know what exactly it was, because it seems that he was a leader who was anti-Zionist, much like yourself. He was a white nationalist, much like yourself. And he seemed to want to lead people into a world with the greater Aryan race moving forward once and for all. You know, I don't see how someone with your political philosophy would disagree with that. But let's move on. You said in chapter 7, The Revolution, that he states about the Nazi party seeking to liberate Germany from Zionist influence. Now, I've looked through chapter 7, briefly skim reading it. Chapter 7 is actually the chapter about his time in the war and his wounding from mustard gas. And a lot of it is really to do with the fact that on returning from the war, he seemed to see Jews and communists everywhere now controlling the region. And then chapter 9 mentions the German Workers' Party for one of the first times. Now, what he doesn't really mention is that initially he was an army agent. He was sent in to infiltrate the organisations of the day. I mean, he says he'd got orders from headquarters to find out what was behind an apparently political organisation that was planning to hold a meeting. Now, he never really played this up later on. It's here where you find out that initially he was sent to spy on what became the Nazi Party for the army. Now, obviously, not a very big thing to find out that he was originally sent to spy on them. And eventually, I suppose the term would be, he turned native and joined the German Workers' Party, eventually calling it the National Socialist German Workers' Party. And you say he kind of took it, he had power, he swept through with people with massive popular support. And to an extent, you're right. You know, but you have to look at the context. It's the context that is all important, my friend. Because Germany at the time was completely broken. Germany was broken by the Versailles Treaty of the Allies. Now, you can say it's the stab in the back theory, which you seem to be a big proponent of, that it was the bankers, the media, the Jews and the Zionists and the Weimar socialists who all conspired to stab the German army in the back and deprive them of victory. Most scholars these days reject that theory. Germany was economically damned anyway. They'd completely run out of resources. They did not have the capability to fight a war anymore. But that doesn't excuse what the French did in the Versailles Treaty, along with Britain and America, of completely trying to hit Germany up the ribs and make them claim responsibility for everything. Now, you went on, your argument kind of jumped around a bit. You went to say that Hitler initially was going to be an artist, and he was a great artist. If you actually read in Mein Kampf, in this version, when he studied for his entrance exams into Vienna, he was rejected because his painting wasn't necessarily that good. He was told he might have a better career within architecture. And he just ended up making a living selling postcards out on the street. But it was the other part I wanted to touch on, I suppose. The part where you carried on saying he had the support of the people and that the Jews left, and we all know what happened to them. They really had it. Well, you know, that seems a little bit glib and a little bit you're a little bit too happy about that for most people not to call you a Nazi. You know, that would be the mark of what I would call a Nazi, someone who gloated at what happened to the Jews after the war. But, you know, a lot of Jews may have also voted for Hitler, because everyone felt Germany was humiliated. They wanted a strong leader, someone who's going to turn around, stick two fingers up at the Allies and tell them, no, this is what we're going to do for the benefit of our nation, and if you don't like it, then you know where to get off. Germany was looking for a leader like that. Unfortunately, he came with a lot of the other policies, like the repression, the lack of freedom of speech, and the massive anti-Semitism, which you say has been inherent throughout him, and he joined with the party. A lot of it could be down to a guy called von Liebenfels, who he may have come across the pamphlets of in Austria, who was a big anti-Semite at the time, because it's just not really documented before then. But the biggest thing I really wanted to pull you up on is your belief that Hitler was some kind of military genius. I'm sorry, but the facts just don't bear that out. I'm going to leave a link below to a paper that was done by a US Army individual. And okay, it might not be necessarily a scholar's work, but it does contain citations of some of Hitler's own generals, who they themselves could not believe that Hitler would not have issued a continuation order to attack the Allies at Dunkirk. Now, in his defence, they say he knew a lot about machinery, he knew a lot about the way bombers, guns, cannon would work. And that's commendable, but he knew very little about tactics. He may well have pulled back because Goering had told him that the Luftwaffe could destroy the forces of the Allies. And how far are you going to trust Hermann Goering, to be honest? And Hitler stopped the tanks. He did not let the tanks advance. If the tanks had advanced, it could have been highly likely that the amount of troops that evacuated Dunkirk would have been far less. But I want to talk even more about one of his biggest errors. And his biggest error is a fault of his own personality alone. And that would be that he did not listen to his generals. He had some fine tacticians around him. I mean, one of the finest men he had with him, and one of the men who managed to do best in World War II with what he had, was Erwin Rommel. Erwin Rommel openly defied the order to fight to the last man and fought a retreat against the Allies and managed to hold a lot of ground. But the biggest problem that Hitler had was with Operation Barbarossa. Now, the starting phase of Operation Barbarossa was the seizure of Moscow. He did not seize Moscow. Zhukov began a counterattack, and in fear, Germany's generals were begging him to retreat. Hitler did not retreat. And in this instance, he was right compared to the German generals, because he has allowed his troops to keep a lot of the equipment they had against the Russians. It was not seized. They managed to keep a lot of stuff going. So they didn't take Moscow, but they didn't really lose a lot of stuff in trying to take it. The problem came, of course, when next year Hitler tried exactly the same tactic at Stalingrad. Completely not listening to his generals, it was the wrong type of situation to try that in, and ended up resulting in von Paulus being completely encircled. The 6th Army, thousands and thousands of men, were lost as Paulus surrendered. That's not the mark of a great tactician. The fact that he was willing to sacrifice thousands and thousands of his own men just to try and fight the Soviets. So, there you go. I know I haven't really talked much about Mein Kampf, but I haven't read a lot of it, and frankly, some of the stuff that you'd had was so, out of kilter with what the facts actually are in Mein Kampf, that I thought I need to call you on it. But it was just really the fact that you were interjecting a lot of your own personal opinion on Hitler. It was a little bit of a love letter here and there that I really felt, someone needs to tell you that Hitler was not a tactical genius and you're wrong on that point. Anyways, if you want to talk about it, you want to have a little to and fro on this, look forward to it. El Presidente Tel, love, peace, liberty.